Coming up, Jeremy Pruitt's career at Tennessee is off to a very fast start, and one Georgia player's career may have reached a bitter end. We'll tell you all about it next, right here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello everyone, welcome to AT&T SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Mike Johnson. It's good to talk to you about the SEC here over the course of the next 60 minutes. We're certainly excited about that. Recruiting, bowl games, everything in between here.
Yeah, touching on a little bit of everything, talking a little bit of Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama. We're going to go around the entire league.
Before we do any of that, though, I'll remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Let's get connected with the show the way we do each and every day here to start things off with our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10. Item number one on the list is what I believe is a very fast start for Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt here, who's making a big impact on the recruiting trail. Let me start with that. Getting the commitment from four-star athlete Alontae Taylor, a guy that might be able to play the wide receiver position, could play the defensive back position. This was a guy heavily involved with Georgia, at one point in time close with Louisville, but takes a visit to Tennessee last weekend, was scheduled to take another visit to Tennessee this weekend, but that won't necessarily be necessary here, given the fact that it looks like Tennessee's already won his services here. This is a big pickup for Jeremy Pruitt.
It is a big pickup, and I think the biggest part of it to me is this is an in-state recruit. This is a guy that's from Tennessee. This guy who's bounced around, decommitted from the program about a month ago, and Jeremy Pruitt's able to step right back in and kind of hit the ground running. I don't want to give too much credit for this. It's a guy who's recruited before. It's not like he flipped somebody, but anytime you can kind of shut that wall off and get those in-state commits when they're leaning other places, considering Georgia, considering other programs, I think it's a big get for him.
Here's why I think that Jeremy Pruitt gets all the credit here for Alontae Taylor. Think about a four-star safety like Trey Dean, gone at the moment that the Tennessee turmoil took place. Cade Mays is a five-star offensive lineman, a guy from Knoxville whose dad played at Tennessee. Okay?
Right,
Decommits from Tennessee because of the turmoil that's going on there. Alontae Taylor was not sticking with Tennessee through all of this. Was probably going to go to Georgia, may have gone to Louisville. I mean, I do think you've got to give Pruitt the credit here for this. It's an example of what you hired Jeremy Pruitt for, which was to be a real elite recruiter.
Yeah, and it's his first commitment, and it's not like this is some guy that's like a three-star commitment. I mean, it's a big deal. Alontae Taylor, to me, by everybody you talk to and everything you read online, this is the best, if not the second best, I guess, recruit that they have right now in their signing class. So it is a big deal. It's a guy, like you mentioned, can play a couple of different positions. Be interested to see what they do with him, but a couple of different storylines to go along with it.
The other thing you have to talk about here, too, is Austin Thomas, the guy that comes over from LSU. That's not a player. It's not he was the general manager for the LSU program, but it's a recruiting guy. And we know when you talk about early signing period with the race, whether you're in a bowl situation like the other SEC teams are, or in a new coach situation like Tennessee is, it's the organization that you have in place that allows you to win early signing day. The hiring of Thomas by Tennessee has universally been treated as a major coup. Another example of what Tennessee's kind of doing here, off and running under the Pruitt administration.
Yeah, and a lot of people out there, I don't know if a lot of people understand what exactly the title is for a guy like this. He's going to be the director of football operations, and what that is, that's kind of the staff that leads some of the recruiting when the coaches aren't able to do it. And it's a big deal. I mean, it's a guy that at LSU was really one of the leaders in the Jacoby Stevens deal last year, got a couple of recruits for LSU out of the state of Tennessee. Randy Ross was this guy when I was getting recruited at Alabama, and he's at Arkansas now doing similar thing. This is a big deal. A lot of people say, oh, he's not an offensive coordinator, he's not a defense coordinator. This is a big deal in terms of recruiting. This is exactly the staff that a lot of Tennessee fans hope that Jeremy Pruitt would build, a staff based around recruiting. This is just another great addition to that
Tennessee fans all already weighing in on this. Daniel Robbins said Tennessee's going to be feared soon. Bama who? Question mark. Sean Hicks says go Big Orange. Michael Hendricks says go Vols. So a lot of Tennessee fans kind of weighing in on this, and with good reason. And speaking of the Tennessee fans, as we talked about on yesterday's show, I do think it's Vols fans who ought to get a lot of credit for what's happening right now under Jeremy Pruitt, because the pushback they had against Greg Schiano, I think, has opened the door for Pruitt to have. Admittedly, it's early. Admitted it's limited recruiting success, but I don't believe that Greg Schiano is going to have any recruiting success with the Vols. In fact, John Talty, a writer for AL.com, earlier today had a pretty interesting tweet, which I think kind of summarizes the scenario in which, Vols fans have kind of combated the media here, in which I think that ultimately they were the winner. I love this line. He says, I know that certain media members are still knighting for Greg Schiano. In other words, trying to defend him and his honor against the Vols fans who were critical of him. Talty goes on to say, I can guarantee you he would not have put together nearly the staff that Pruitt's building right now at Tennessee. And I think that is true when you think about the collection of Kevin Sheeran, Tyson Elton, Austin Thomas we just talked about, on and on you go, and the list of 4-star players. Greg Schiano, with no ties to the South, was not going to be able to come in and do what Pruitt's already doing here. Now, it remains to be seen what Pruitt's success is going to be like on the field, but he's off to a better start than Schiano would have been off to. And I think that Vols fans get the game ball for making this switch.
Well, I agree with that. And I think that what you looked for in Jeremy Pruitt was, listen, everybody last week was talking about Tennessee hires an Alabama guy. Well, guess what? Pruitt has quickly made himself into a Tennessee guy. He's got guys from Tennessee. This is a guy who, in Austin Thomas, who was a defensive analyst under Monty Kiffin and Lane Kiffin back in 2009. He's from Franklin, Tennessee. He knows the lay of the land up there. And much like the way that Kirby Smart, in my opinion, has fenced up Georgia, at Tennessee, the recruiting base is not as big. So you have to fence up Tennessee. You have to keep everybody in that state. You cannot let anybody exit the state of Tennessee. That's exactly why this guy was brought in. The amount of work he did for LSU and a ton of these different topics, I think, is a big reason why he's there.
I can tell you, for a lot of Tennessee people, one of the most demoralizing things of all happened last year during those end of season football awards banquets in Tennessee, and you had award winners one right after the other. Now, Trey Smith was a local product that stayed home. Guys like T. Higgins going to Clemson. Other examples of that, of guys that left the state of Tennessee to go play. Most of the kids, frankly, went to Clemson. That's the kind of thing that Jeremy Pruitt's got to correct here moving forward.
And I think that's a big deal that Jeremy Pruitt, and it's like I said, everybody last week's talking about this, an Alabama guy, hired a Nick Saban guy. They went a different direction. Philip Fulmer, sold his soul, or whatever you wanted to call it. This is Jeremy Pruitt proclaiming the fact that he is enveloped in the Tennessee culture. He wants to be a part of Tennessee football. He wants to bring in people that love Tennessee and can keep these kids in Tennessee. And, no matter what you want to label it, is this a huge win? Is this not a huge win? Is it, was this guy already committed? Was he going to go there anyways? I think that when you look at Jeremy Pruitt and the outlook, had he not gotten this guy, it would have been a huge loss. So I think you have to give him credit for it being a huge win.
Let me move on here to item number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Line first and 10 list. Georgia, plenty of wins on the field. Maybe a little bit of a loss here, though, in the public perception column as another player arrested, the third since Georgia won the SEC championship to start the month of December. This time it's freshman defensive back Latavius Brini, who has not played at all this season, would redshirt and be available as a redshirt freshman next year, but his future in football very much in doubt right now, looking at a felony forgery charge here. And DogNation.com had some of the details of why Brini was arrested. I'm going to read here what Seth Emerson's report was. Alleged by police to have used a fake $100 bill to purchase $8 worth of merchandise on July 14th, obviously getting $92 back in cash at Pet Supplies Plus, which is in Athens. The $100 bill was later revealed to be counterfeit. The way they determined it was him was because he filled out a rewards card with the store while he was allegedly using the counterfeit $100 bill. Then he went back in the store and used a debit card later on, and they determined this was him. This whole thing went down in July. I have no idea why he's just now being arrested and charged for this, but you played the game. I mean, a football roster is made up of a lot of guys. What do you make of this situation involving Latavius Brini? Not an impact player for Georgia, but whose arrest comes at a very high-profile time.
Yeah, we used to get in meetings like this. We'd have these leadership councils, and the first thing we'd almost always say, when it was a players-only meeting, don't be stupid. And obviously, coaches aren't going to come and say, this is exactly what you're talking about. And we had guys at Alabama that were stupid. They did stupid things. And I mentioned to you on Dog Nation Daily today, we had a guy who went out back of our dorm at the football dorm and held up somebody with a pellet gun to try to steal their phone. It was like, what are you?
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be laughing.
I know I'm not supposed to laugh at it either. And it was a guy considered to be a pretty good player at the time. And I can't imagine what you're doing. This to me fits in that category. There's a ton of personalities. There's a ton of different people on these teams coming from all different areas, and you don't want to point at and say a cultural problem or it's just somebody just being dumb. There's no other way to kind of put this entire scenario. It's just somebody being dumb, and hopefully all these things kind of settle out.
Trevor Thomas says, do you think this is a coaching problem for Georgia with all the arrests? And he's obviously referencing the 3 that have happened since December. I mean, I asked you this question on the show this morning too, because you were a leader. You understand what it's like to have some influence over the rest of the roster. Obviously, the coaches want some of that as well. I mean, when you have Jason Stanley and Natrez Patrick getting in trouble for a little bit of weed in a car, when you have Latavius Brini allegedly passing on a $100 counterfeit bill, is there something that the organization can do to limit these kinds of things from happening?
Well, I don't know. You want to ask, is there a cultural problem? I think had this been another marijuana-related arrest, you would definitely go down that road and ask the question, is there a cultural issue at Georgia right now? But I think this is such an outlier that we can't even try to lump this in with the rest of the things going on. And I said the same thing about Antonio Callaway. I didn't want to lump all these Florida players together that were doing these different things. And this was before all the whole scandal came out in August and everybody was suspended for the year. But you try not to lump these two things together because there's different players in different places and different age groups doing different things in colleges, and I don't think you can lump them together. Now, if you're asking me if Kirby Smart's going to sit down in front of this leadership council and say, you guys need to talk to the team, figure out what's going on, 100% think that'll happen. I think there will be a ton of meetings about saying, hey, guys, let's see if we can keep our head out of the sand, keep our head out of the gutter, and see if we can move forward as a team.
Well, here's the shame for a guy like Latavius Brini. And listen, on this show, we try to be as candid as we possibly can be. And if you just want to be blunt, Brini was only a slight take for Georgia last season. Right. This is a 3-star prospect in a time when Georgia's only looking at 4- and 5-star guys, but he's a big defensive back. I think some coaches thought he had a chance to kind of grow into a player. How frustrating is it for the Georgia coaches right now that they took a chance on a player that ends up potentially sort of stabbing them in the back in terms of the negative headline? Yeah. It's almost like, why even take a chance on a guy that you don't think can play because you only run the risk of him, doing something to paint your program in a negative light.
I can't even imagine right now, because when you take players like that, you do vet these guys. You say, you know what, I don't know what we're getting in terms of, this guy might be a 3-star player. Maybe he can help us out and just needs to develop a little bit. But, he's got great character. He's got this GPA. He's got this on his ACTs. We can plug him right in. We know he won't be an issue. And then he comes back to be an issue. And so, it's like you take a flyer on some of these guys sometimes, and you can't fault Kirby Smart and his staff for doing this, but it just didn't turn out for the best.
So, obviously, some of the non-Georgia folks in the comment section taking a couple shots at the dogs. Scott Franklin says UGA crime dogs. Greg Steele, a really good Florida fan, says Kirby's players are out of control. And listen, I'm going to be a UG homer here for 2 seconds. For the non-Georgia fans, the last thing you want is Latavius Brini kicked off this team. The last thing you want is, somebody that's involved in another issue kicked off this team. Georgia can only sign 24 right now, but in terms of the overall 85-man roster, replacing this guy with another 4- and 5-star guy only makes Georgia more talented here. Right. So be careful what you wish for, because swift justice in the way of Kirby Smart is only going to mean a better player in that roster spot at some point in time.
Right, and I'll go the anti-homer sentiment too, where I look at this as, we did ask these questions about Florida. We asked these questions about Alabama when the Sean Hand thing came down about the DUIs and who should be kicked off team, who should be suspended. And I think, listen, 3 arrests in the period of 2 weeks after an SEC championship it's fair to ask about a culture problem. Do I think it is? No, but I think it's fair to ask the question.
Jeremy Pettis says BA says he's going to be a dog's homer for just a minute. LOL. Thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate you taking a shot at me here as well. And if you want to know the honest truth, here is the one thing that I do think if you're Georgia, you got to be just a little bit concerned about. I'm not a lawyer. I have no idea what kind of legal trouble Brini's facing. I'm assuming it's pretty serious. Felony here for forgery sounds like a big deal. But I've seen enough episodes of Law and Order to know they sit him down. The first thing they're asking him is, "Where'd you get this money?"
Oh yeah.
And the answer to that question is potentially a problem.
That could be tricky. Are we talking about? Are we talking about monopoly money here? Or are we talking about something that was legit counterfeit? Bill episode. That's going to be a big question.
But when you think about what did happen to Florida, where all of a sudden you had 9, 10, 11 guys mixed up in that credit card scheme. Obviously, you hope that whatever was going on with Brini, the allegations against him, whether they're true or not, that they are contained to just Brini. If you are a Georgia fan,
hold your breath.
All right, item number 3 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list. So LSU is actually on the football field practicing again. It feels like these bowl practices are never going to start for a lot of these teams, but LSU is on the field getting ready for Notre Dame and dealing with an issue that kind of reared and showed up last year when Leonard Fournette controversially made the decision not to play in the LSU bowl game and go focus on the NFL. Well, obviously, there are a couple star players for LSU potentially facing the same kind of choice here this season, and it would appear that both Arden Key and Darius Geis are maybe kind of making this choice in slightly different ways here. Let me start with Ed Orgeron talking about Arden Key, who not on the practice field yet, and frankly not developing and recovering quite as fast as maybe Ed Orgeron thought he would. Here's Orgeron on Arden Key.
Do you feel like Arden Key is going to practice and play?
The hardest questionable. He hasn't come around like I thought he was going to come around, and he's questionable right now. He's not practicing, and he's questionable, and that's all I know about it.
So questionable, not coming around as fast as he would. Is this a Leonard Fournette thing all over again, where Key is just simply not going to put his body at risk for a bowl game against Notre Dame when there's not really a lot on the line for LSU?
Yeah, this is just strictly my opinion, but that's to me what it's kind of shaping out to be. When you say a guy hasn't come along as fast as you expect him to be, that means that maybe there's a situation where he's holding himself back. I don't want to read too much into it. I don't want to speak for Ed Orgeron and Arden Key. I don't know. But to me, just from the outside looking in, here's a guy who's taking his time, who wants to make sure he is completely 100% healthy because he knows what's on the line. Maybe a guy like Arden Key, if you're not 100%, then maybe you sway back to the decision that, hey, I'm not going to play in this game because I've got the risk of further injuring myself.
Cliff Nelson correcting me. He says Fournette did not forego the bowl game for the draft. He was injured, and Orgeron told him not to play. think this comes down to one of those things of would he have played if it was Alabama in the SEC championship,
right.
an East team in the SEC championship.
And I think it's fair to say that too, and I think that's why I take the stance I do on Arden Key, where Arden Key, slow playing the injury, not slow playing. I don't want to say that about a guy. I don't want to talk on injuries, but I'm just saying that if you're Arden Key right now, you're telling Orgeron, hey, I'm 80%, hey, I'm 85%. Maybe you're nudging things that direction.
And Esteban Estevez says, in the case of Darius Geis and Arden Key, he thinks they're both coming back next season. Neither one of them had a great year this year. And Esteban, I don't know what to say about either one of those two guys on that. But in the case of Ed Orgeron, when it comes to Darius Geis, Orgeron also suggested that maybe Geis could be coming back. Geis also a little different than Keenan, and it looks like Geis does want to play in the bowl game. Here's Orgeron on Darius Geis.
And that's who he is, man. Darius loves football, and he's loved every day he walked in this room. I've never seen him down, and he wants to finish strong, and I'm sure he's motivated. And a 10-win season for him would mean a lot for us. And I'm not sure that he's made a total decision if he's leaving or not yet. After talking to him, so we'll see.
So first of all, to me, sounds like there's a big difference in how Orgeron's talking about Darius Geis and how he's talking about Arden Key. Now, I may be guilty of reading too much into that, but that's what it sort of sounds like to me. But how about Esteban's point that he thinks both these guys could come back because they didn't help themselves with their stock too much with the way they played this season? That seems like wishful thinking to me, but do you agree?
I would think that one of the two would come back. If I'm Arden Key, I'm coming back. I think you did damage to yourself stepping away from the program in the spring, and I know he had personal issues. I know that he needed shoulder surgery, and when he got back, he had trouble getting over that, but you had the weight gain, you had trouble getting back into shape, you had all these questions asked about your performance on the field. If I'm Arden Key, I'm showing back up. I'm going all the way through spring practice, I'm making sure I'm 100%, and I'm locking myself into a top 10 draft pick because that's the talent he has. He should be a top 10 draft pick. Arden Key has all the skills to be up there, but he didn't help himself out this year. I think Darius Geis, the running back position is a completely different thing to me. I think when you look at running back, you look at the hits you're going to have, you look at the wear and tear you're going to have on your body, you look at the ceiling at age 30, probably getting out of the NFL. To me, Darius Geis has proven himself enough to say, you know what, I'm probably a top 15, top 20 pick.
Jamie Bailey in the comment section says, Ed Orgeron's voice sounds like my tractor. And it is amazing.
It's low, isn't it?
I mean, it really is. It is quite a thing trying to decipher what it is that he's saying.
He's lower than anybody I think we ever listened to sound bites. I mean, it's like down here.
Yeah, the words just kind of run together.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the closest I've ever come to doing an impersonation, by the way. I say this all the time. I can barely do my own voice. The last thing I need to try to do is do somebody else's voice. But ultimately, I think the Key and Geis are probably both gone.
To me, Arden Key's ceiling is much higher than it is right now. And I think you have to weigh out those options to your Arden Key that, how much do you love the game? He's going to get those questions at the Combine. They're going to say, how much do you love the game? How much are you willing to play through an injury in the NFL? Because those seasons are a lot longer and a lot more wear and tear. He's going to have to be able to answer those questions. So I don't know if he serviced himself enough this year to lock himself in to the top 10 pick that he should be and that guaranteed money that you're going to see at the top end of that first round.
And by the way, quick final point on this. I know this was a tired subject from last year, but it feels like something you got to weigh in on this here on this as well. If you are going to the NFL and you are not playing in a playoff level bowl game, I actually don't have a problem with you not playing the game. Whether you have to pretend you have a hurt injury and you really don't, or you just don't want to play, I've got no problem with you going to get ready for the NFL. And by the way, giving your program a chance to play some younger players. If you're not in one of these major bowls, the younger players are more interesting anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to be careful, though. Just from the player's perspective, I think you have to be very careful of the people that are going to be asking. You have to be almost a lock for a first-round pick to make that decision. Because I think if you're one of those guys that teeters second, third, fourth round, you have to be willing to compete. People, that's why the Senior Bowl is such a big deal. People want to see you show up and compete in games like this and play to the best of your ability and play your heart out when nothing's on the line. That's what NFL execs want to see. So you have to be careful that you don't damage yourself as like a guy that's a potential fifth-round pick that you show up and say, you know what, I'm not going to play. That to me is kind of a black mark.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I feel like, have you ever noticed this, though? When it comes to the NFL, they're always looking for reasons to sort of downgrade your character, but they never say, boy, this guy worked so hard, we got to pay him a little bit more money and draft him a little higher. I mean, it's all a scam, right? It's all an excuse for figuring out a way to pay you less money.
Listen, all it takes is one team. All it takes is one team to fall out of love with you or one team to fall in love with you. And I'm just saying that if it's teetering, if you're trying to work your way up draft boards, then why not go out there and play? Especially if you're at a position like D-end or running back. Go out there, get 3 sacks, all of a sudden you're rocking back up the draft boards.
Bo Molinari says, why would you jeopardize a career for a meaningless game? I'm sort of with Bo on that. Before we move on here to item number 4, we're going to talk about the Auburn Tigers. Let me squeeze in one quick note here. Javon Becton, the 3-star prospect, a part of Georgia's 2018 class, has decommitted from that program. And this is some of that movement that you do expect to see with some of these programs who are kind of making a push for those, top 2018 rankings. Becton's been on the class for a while, but he's just a 3-star name. Georgia's probably got some 4- and 5-star priorities ahead of him. This may not be the most attractive side of the business here, but you are going to see some of this movement here as schools like Alabama and Georgia try to make sure they get the best possible classes they can get.
This to me is the downside of the rule we have now, where there's a limit on 25. And a lot of people looked at oversigning and overcrowding and these signing classes and thought, man, that's a bad look. You're just hogging all these recruits. Well, this is the bad side of it. This is what this kid wants to go to Georgia. He wants to be a part of this class possibly, and you're just saying, hey, listen, we don't have any room for you. And they should have room. You're going to have guys that transfer. Right. You're going to have guys that fall out of these classes, guys that get medically cleared to go elsewhere or cleared to hang up their cleats for the rest of their career. And yet this guy can't get into a program that he possibly wanted to go. I think this is definitely the downside of it.
But don't you think, though, there is something – I mean, I don't think you need to be ashamed of saying we want the 25 best players that we can get. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying to a player, hey, I know you want to be on the field. Your best chance of playing is probably going to be somewhere else. I mean, wouldn't you want to be tapped on the shoulder and said, hey, I'm going to give you some honest feedback here? I mean, you were a player. That's not it's a hypothetical question for me. It's not hypothetical for you. Yeah. I mean, wouldn't you have wanted to be told the truth about we don't think you're going to play here, but you can probably play if you go there? One of your other options. I mean, isn't that kind of what you'd want to hear?
Yeah, Kirby's doing anybody that he tells that to, and I don't know that that's exactly the situation here, but anybody.
So that's our assumption.
Anybody you're telling that to, I'm telling you, you're doing him a favor. Everybody right now is trying to avoid what happened to Nick Saban in Alabama last year, where you get to sign a day, and the guy's trying to sign, and then they give him a gray shirt offer, and then all of a sudden he's crying in front of the National Signing Day crowd, and it's just not a good look for anybody. I think everybody this year is trying to avoid that a little bit. I think Tennessee did some house cleaning in the last couple of days with some of their guys. I think Kirby Smart's doing it right now. I think Alabama has been hesitant to put out offers in those same situations, trying not to approach those situations.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to just be blunt, here's how Alabama does it. There'll be guys about to make their announcement, and they've got like 2 finalists. It's Alabama and somebody else, and they keep postponing their announcement. Yeah. That's generally a clue that they can't quite get into that Alabama class. And I'm not going to put anybody's business out there on Front Street, but a lot of that kind of stuff is what you see when they want to make a commitment announcement. You assume it's going to be Alabama, and then that announcement doesn't go down. That's Alabama's way of saying, why don't you wait just a little bit.
And it's more difficult even this year with the early signing period, because some of these coaches are saying, all right, who's going to flip on the 20th? Who can we try to circle back around and get? Who might be open late to some of these commitment possibilities? Who will be signing in February? There's just so many new layers to all these recruiting sanctions.
All right, Deborah Harris says War Eagle. Let's talk a little Auburn here. Item number 4 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list. But before we do, I do this every single day. I jumped the gun on the topic and forget to tell you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Now, item number 4, as we said, does touch on the Auburn Tigers. And I thought our buddy Justin Ferguson had a great column at SECCountry.com, really looking at how Gus Malzahn may have been saved at Auburn, giving a lot of that credit to Kevin Steele, who was a candidate for some head coaching jobs here during the coaching carousel that span? What's the past?
I don't know.
Either way, it happened. It's over, and Kevin Steele stays at Auburn. But nonetheless, what Justin tells us is that Steele's success at Auburn the last couple of years may be a big reason why Gus Malzahn is actually a head coach viewed in high favor right now. Let me show you a couple sentences here from Justin Ferguson on this. He says, for Malzahn, the hire of Steele has been a job saver. In the last 2 seasons, Auburn's biggest letdowns have come on the offensive side of the ball. Without Steele's defense keeping scores low, there's no telling where this program would be after it struggled on offense late in 2016 and early in 2017. And I think that is true. And I think Chip Lindsey helped with this some too. I think Lindsey had full control of the offense by the time you reached the crucial games in the month of November for Auburn. But Kevin Steele over the last 2 years was a constant for this team. I mean, Justin's right here that Malzahn's viewed favorably because of the work that Kevin Steele did.
Yeah, and Kevin Steele's one of those guys who we talk about has been around the block in terms of coaching. I mean, he's coached at a ton of places. He's been at Florida State. He's been at Clemson, LSU, Alabama, Auburn. I mean, he's been around the block. But when you talk about the toughness that he's brought to this defense, I think that's the biggest part. When you have these spread offenses, sometimes it can get lost in some of these spring practices and these camp practices of, hey, we're going to spread things out. We're not going to be able to get in these situations where it's goal line and we can add some tenacity. That's what Kevin Steele's brought. And I thought one of the best part of these pieces, and I have it sitting here in front of me, was he shows the rankings from 2015 to 2017. We're not talking about like moving up like 20 spots, 30 spots. I had like third down percentage, 110th in the country. I mean, and you fast forward to this year, and all of a sudden they're way up at 19th and 20th, and 36 sacks on the season. It's become a big deal what this Auburn defense is. They've got the players in place. They've got the continuity under Kevin Steele, and I think they're building a great championship caliber defense.
So here's where things get concerning if you're an Auburn fan, I believe. you just gave Gus Malzahn a lot of money, and I told you, I think there's I think there's stuff to like about Chip Lindsey when he asked full control of the offense. Obviously, you made the strong case there for Kevin Steele. So do you like Gus Malzahn, or do you like what his assistants have been able to do? In Steele's case, the last 2 years, and Chip Lindsey's case most this year, because they're both head coaching candidates in the future. Steele didn't get a job, but he's probably going to. Chip Lindsey's going to take a job at some point in time. And then what are you left with Malzahn other than a really big contract that's really expensive to buy you out of? Do we feel good about Malzahn here, or are we going to give most discredit to the assistants? Because, I mean, a lot of folks act like it was a no-brainer that you had to re-up Malzahn after he won the Iron Bowl, but is it really him that you like if you're Auburn?
Well, I think he deserves a lot of credit. I don't know if he deserves all the credit, 100% of the credit, but he deserves enough of it to where that you know that Malzahn, given the right circumstances, can win football games. And I think that was the biggest question you and I both had going into the year about Malzahn. Can he beat Alabama? Can he beat Georgia? Can he win some of those big games? Well, guess what? He proved it time and time again this year.
Yeah, he technically won both. Yeah, Georgia got the rematch, but
he proved he can win those games. So I think that what you have is a coach that you feel comfortable with under certain circumstances that can win big football games. Listen, there's a lot of universities out there right now that would kill for a coach that you said under the right circumstances. It's almost the way I feel about Jimbo Fisher. Yes, he had a bad record this year, but given the right players and the right circumstances, he's a guy that can take you to the top. I think there's a lot of universities that would love to have a guy like that.
Kenneth Clough says you can tell when Malzahn's calling the plays, it's up the middle, up the middle, up the middle punt. E.D. Booker says if Gus Malzahn's going to rob Auburn, at least he could wear a mask. And I reference both those comments to say that this is the type of situation that can change very quickly. Malzahn's support right now may be wide, but it's about that thick. It's very, very thin. It is the kind of thing that where he can be turned on very quickly by his own fan base if 2018 does not get off to a good start. Nobody cares about the UCF bowl game. It's about 2018 for right now. If he doesn't get off to a good start, there's going to be a lot of that criticism of folks that forgot how good it felt to win the Iron Bowl at the end of November. And you made the comparison to Jimbo Fisher. I think that's an unfair comparison because I think in the case of Fisher, there's a I don't know if it's much longer, but it's a longer track record. It's quarterbacks develop. Malzahn had Cam Newton fall into his lap and he won a national championship as an offensive coordinator in 2010. But in Jimbo Fisher's case, it's the development of Jamarcus Russell. It's the development of E.J. Manuel, of Christian Ponder, of Jameis Winston. There's a lot more developing that's gone on. The development of DeAndre Francois before his injury in 2017. I mean, I do think there's a little more there when it comes to Jimbo Fisher. Malzahn's had some good moments, but man, it is not consistent really at all.
Well, I agree with you to that extent, but my counter question to this entire scenario is if you were Auburn and you hadn't given Gus Malzahn the money and you haven't given him the raise and all of a sudden he goes to Arkansas, who is it that you're going to get? You're not going to hire Chip Lindsey. You're not going to hire Kevin Steele as your...
Maybe they should have targeted Jimbo Fisher.
Well, and that's possible.
I'm talking about before the Texas A&M thing happened.
And I agree to that. I think that there's a possibility they could have gone out and maybe offered Jimbo Fisher a lucrative offer, but then you ask yourself, what do you have in Jimbo Fisher? I think that Gus Malzahn has been slowly building something, and he's proven to be a coach that can at least compete with Nick Saban in some of these circumstances. So I think you almost have to go out there and award him this contract.
So it's totally fine that we disagree on this, but it sounds like we do. If I got to pay $7 million to a coach, I'd rather give it to Jimbo Fisher than Gus Malzahn.
And there's no guarantee that Jimbo Fisher leaves FSU to come to Auburn, though. I mean, the existing...
Well, no, I'm just talking about in general. I mean, not even necessarily coming to Auburn, but A&M's in a spot where it's having to pay Jimbo Fisher $7 million a year, more than that, I guess. Malzahn's essentially making the same thing at Auburn. I had to get Fisher to leave Florida State to come to Texas A&M. That's the money that you have to spend there. But I feel a lot better about Fisher at that price tag than I do Gus Malzahn. I think Fisher's going to keep Aggies fans happier longer than Gus Malzahn's going to be able to.
I guess my only point is that I don't think Jimbo goes to Auburn for that amount of money. He had a pre-existing relationship with the AD at Texas A&M. He felt comfortable in the administration, so he moved on. I don't know that he moves up to Auburn for that price. Maybe he does. Maybe he's just ready to get out of Florida State. But I think if you're an Auburn fan, you have to look at this season and say, man, we have to keep status quo because Gus Malzahn is learning on the job and he's building something and he's a good coach.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let me move on to item number 5 here on our AT&T SEC Country Life First and 10 list with an update on a story we talked about yesterday. We addressed a 5-star defensive end KJ Henry. He's really more of an outside linebacker, probably in a 3-4 defense. That's probably what he's going to play at the college level, but nonetheless, he's one of the top 10 players in the country according to 24/7 Sports Composite Team ranking. His dad is also the running backs coach at Charlotte, and the issue came up of what if one of the schools, and Henry had 5 finalists, probably doesn't include Alabama in that group anymore, but he had 5 finalists. What if one of those schools were to hire your dad? Would that sway you? Well, Brad Crawford tweeted about this from 24/7 Sports. We showed just in the show yesterday. As the recruiting world turns, sounds like the Gamecocks, that's who Brad covers, could get a leg up on Clemson, Alabama for KJ Henry if they hired his father as a 10th assistant. Henry himself talked about this a little bit in The State, which is the newspaper there in Columbia, South Carolina. He says, if my dad were to end up anywhere, obviously that's what he loves doing. It's part of his family. I like all 5 schools enough where that would be a big decision coming forward. Nothing where it's an analyst type deal or anything like that, but if he could go in, coach, that'd be big. At the same time, we already have talked about that. He's not pressuring me like if he were to get a job. He's letting every coach know that doesn't ensure that I'm committing there. It's still my decision, but it's definitely something that I think about. And this is one of those issues where people think more about the last part of that quote, maybe the beginning part of that quote, and the part in the middle. This was really taken as Henry was kind of putting some demands out there that he wanted to see his dad get hired as a coach, and that's the school that would get his services. The real truth, though, may be a little bit more complicated than that. Let me give you some audio here from Dog Nation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell, who knows the Henry situation and all around the SEC when it comes to recruiting. And maybe Henry, through the way these quotes have sort of spread around the internet, maybe been painted unfairly in a negative light. Here's Jeff Sentell.
I don't think that's really a story. I think that story's kind of a non-starter. The nicest way I can describe that situation is if you look how KJ Henry answered all those questions, he answered them in the most political, the most right way to do so. The one part I didn't like about that story was you had something where if one of these schools that you're deeply considering offered your dad a job, how would that affect your decision? Well, he's already deeply considering all of those schools, so of course it would make a difference. But I don't think KJ Henry's decision will be impacted one iota about what's happening with offering his father a job. To me, that would be an act of desperation probably for a school that was probably out of it trying to get back in it. His father, Keith Henry, has had a long career as an assistant coach in college football, and he is definitely not needing anything from his son's decision to help his career along.
Jamie Bailey in the comment section says KJ was wrong by how all of this came out. That's also the way that I take that comment from Jeff Sentell there as well. Does this change the initial story here? I mean, the initial story and the way it was perceived by many on the internet was, oh, this is a prima donna athlete making strong demands. But it sounds like that Henry was only responding to a question he was asked, and he didn't bring the topic up out of thin air.
Yeah.
It seems like Henry may have gotten a bit of a raw deal on this.
I agree. I agree. You know, when you approach this topic and you say, why is this kid talking about his dad possibly getting a job, and there's no way, you know, South Carolina is going to hand a job to somebody when they need somebody on staff. And we talked about it yesterday at length. That, you know, if you're Will Muschamp or you're one of these other programs, that 10th coach is a big deal for this upcoming season. You need somebody on staff that can go out and recruit.
Yeah.
I mean, you need somebody that can coach up these extra position players, maybe a special teams coordinator. That's a big hire. You can't just throw it away because some player might be good for you in the future, especially a linebacker, not a quarterback, not a running back, a linebacker, a guy that could be different. Another angle I took on it was, you know, South Carolina and Clemson and these other programs that are chasing him that are going to be best for his career, they're not in a situation where they have to make desperation moves. Not most of them. I mean, if you're talking about a lower tier program that needs to move on and needs to make a big splash recruit, then maybe you look at a situation like that. But I do think he got a raw deal. I don't think he intended for the headlines to be what they were about. And I think that's what you get sometimes when you have five-star players that everybody's looking at your decision. What edge can we get? You know, all these recruiting fan bases, what edge can we get? And then that comes out and a lot of people run with it.
Bo Molinari a little critical of Henry on this, and I guess this is the kind of thing, I'm referencing obviously the comment section here, this is the kind of thing that's going to die a slow death in terms of the perception on Henry, but I am going to stick to my guns on this, in that I don't think that he did anything wrong. He was asked, would you like for the school you go to hire your dad as a coach? What's he going to say? No, I don't want that. I mean, of course he's going to want that. This would appear to be an instance to me where the reporter's question impacts the narrative of the story more so than the answer that Henry gave.
It probably does too. And to me, though, there is a little bit of leeway in there to judge how he answered it, because this wasn't like he just came out and said, oh, you know, if my dad was on staff, I'd go. I mean, he's like, you know, not an analyst. I mean, he's got to be on the
That is fair, yeah.
Not an analyst. He's got to be on the 10-man staff if I'm going to look at it in that direction. So I think there was a little background right there for KJ.
And I won't deny that there is an element of that seems like he was pretty well informed about the different levels of employment that you could get, which is probably an interesting point to bring up there. Item number 6 on our AT&T SEC Country Live, First and 10. We started the show by talking about the great success, at least in terms of coaching hires and a big 4-star recruiting win with Alontae Taylor that Jeremy Pruitt's having at the beginning of his Tennessee career here. But there's also in the news here the guy that does not get the Tennessee job, and that's T. Martin, the offensive coordinator, one of the offensive coordinators out there at USC. He does not get involved in the Tennessee job, gets the interview, does not go really far. And with USC getting back to a bowl practice here, Martin was asked about, did you want the Tennessee job? Were you involved in those discussions? And Martin gave a pretty honest answer. Here's T. Martin.
Did you talk to Tennessee about that position for yourself?
Yeah, I did. It was something that, it was a situation where if I was going to go back to Tennessee, it was to be as the head coach and not as the coordinator, and I made that message very clear. And so when I was out of that discussion, then they moved on to do what they had to do.
I mean, I think that with all due respect to T. Martin, who I really was impressed with as a player, and I think that he's done a good job working his way up the ranks in the coaching ranks, I think that Jeremy Pruitt does represent a good hire for the Vols. I do. Inexperienced head coach, Martin would have been as well, but I think that Pruitt just knows the SEC really well. I think he's going to do a pretty good job, at least in terms of bringing in talent for Tennessee. But in Martin's situation, I still don't quite have a good handle on why it was that he didn't get more consideration, to the point where, I mean, it just never seemed that Martin was getting this job, even though for a while Tennessee didn't have anybody else to give it to.
Yeah, and it goes back to kind of the point I made a couple of weeks ago when his name just continually didn't come up. And you hear that maybe Phil Fulmer talked to him and maybe he didn't want to come on staff, obviously, as a coordinator. I still think there's something in the back of T. Martin's mind that says he'll be a head coach at Tennessee one day. And to me, it's smart for him to stay away from the coordinator position until he gets the opportunity to be the head coach. Like, you don't want to step in. You don't want to be the coordinator when Jeremy Pruitt goes down and something bad happens. Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, where do I go? I just got fired as a coordinator. So I think it was smart for him to stay away and say, you know what, unless the position is head coach, I'm going to stay away from Tennessee right now. I'll stay out at USC.
But the problem here is the other coordinators who were being considered late in the process, once Philip Fulmer got the job, got the multiple interviews, I'm assuming those happened face-to-face. T. Martin's by telephone. One of Jeremy Pruitt's first acts is to hire somebody that worked alongside him at USC and Tyson Helton. It's almost like Martin, if he wants to be a head coach, has got to realize that he's going to be the guy calling the plays out there at USC. And maybe if he wants to be a coach in the South, maybe it's time to start working your way back towards the South here a little bit, as opposed to way out there in USC, because that line on your resume did not really get you the attention at Tennessee you may have hoped it would have gotten.
Yeah, and I think there's, I think if Martin could answer questions about this, I think that he would say, maybe he's been trying to do that. I mean, there's been whispers about him at Georgia State. There's been whispers about him at South Alabama. He has had interest in other head coaching jobs, possibly building in that direction. I don't fault him for saying, you know what, I didn't want to be involved other than being the head coach, because it's like I told you, if I'm T. Martin and I'm like number 16 on the wish list for Tennessee, don't call me. I don't want to be the guy that goes and rescues the program. I'd love to be the guy that comes and helps wins championships, not to dig you out of a hole.
All right, so here at AT&T SEC Country Live, one of the things we love doing each and every week is looking back at one of the great moments in the recent past of the SEC. And this week, obviously, you're thinking back to the Heisman Trophy ceremony from last weekend. No SEC involvement there, but, well, back in 2015 there was, when Derrick Henry from the Alabama Crimson Tide hoisted that famous trophy and helped the Alabama fans enjoy a terrific season. Let's take a look back at 2015 here, courtesy of Tony Chachere's with our Seasons to Remember.
Tony Chachere's presents Seasons to Remember and a look back at 2015. The SEC didn't have a Heisman finalist this season. Auburn's Kerryon Johnson and Georgia's Roquan Smith came the closest, finishing 9th and 10th respectively in the voting. But it wasn't that long ago the nation's top player hailed from the SEC. In 2015, Alabama running back Derrick Henry rushed for 2,219 yards to claim the award and lead the Crimson Tide to a national championship. Elsewhere in the SEC, 2015 was a good year for Ole Miss, which won the Sugar Bowl 48-20 versus Oklahoma State, finished the year ranked number 10 in the country, and got bragging rights against Alabama for a second straight year by knocking off the Tide in Tuscaloosa. The SEC East was claimed in 2015 by Florida, and new coach Jim McElwain, who in his first season produced results that had Gators fans thinking the sky was the limit. McElwain would be fired less than 2 years later, but still stands as one of the figures that makes 2015 a season to remember.
And Seasons to Remember here on AT&T SEC Country Live is brought to you by our friends at Tony Chachere's. And if you're looking to spice up your next tailgate, look no further than the taste of Tony Chachere's, tailgate champion since 1972. Tony Chachere's makes everything taste great. It's really kind of hard to believe, going back to 2015, that it wasn't that long ago, but McElwain in his first year at Florida, like he was building something. You win the SEC East right there, and then, Well, here we are, not even through the 2017 season. McElwain's already out of a job.
Yeah, Derrick Henry picks up a ton of steam down the stretch. Nobody midway through the 2015 season thought he would set like that single-season rushing record like he did, and then all of a sudden picks up 35, 40 carries against Auburn and winds up with the Heisman Trophy.
Remind me about this. Were you on the team when Mark Ingram won, Alabama's first Heisman Trophy?
That was my senior year, yes.
How big of a deal was that for an Alabama program that had done everything to not have had a Heisman Trophy until Ingram won it?
You can imagine and I think Georgia in a way is going through this same scenario right now, building up to something like this. But you can imagine how proud Alabama fans. First of all, the week before, you just beat Tim Tebow and the Florida Gators. You go into the Heisman Trophy ceremony and you're able to get the Heisman Trophy, and then you know that you're an undefeated football team going to play in Pasadena. The pride that I think the university had at that time was just unparalleled in a lot of different ways.
All right, absolutely. Let's get back to our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 here. I'll also remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Item number 7 on our list. Boy, more whining from some of these folks outside the SEC about what the SEC is getting done in recruiting. Now, I'm a big believer that the early signing period was established so that some of these schools outside the South could finally get some players. It may not be working out the way that some of these folks wanted. An example of this is Rick Neuheisel was on the SiriusXM radio network, the ESPNU channel, kind of complaining about how the early signing period, once again, kind of works to the benefit of the blue blood programs, those elite programs, many of which in the South, that this is all sort of a built-in advantage for them. Here is Neuheisel kind of whining about how early signing is working out right now.
This is what people didn't realize when they did this December signing date. That the amount of that's going on right now in terms of coaching changes and people having to be here, there, and everywhere is ridiculous. To me, if they wanted an early signing date, and the whole idea behind it was to allow those who knew where they wanted to go to just get off the market, go where they're going, and then hopefully save some money for everybody else because you're not wasting time on guys who know where they want to go. That being said, that should have been done in August, right before you start camp, so that you can focus on your season up until, and then once the season's over, now you have the next couple of months, or at least 6 weeks, to go ahead and get ready for that February. And again, this just lends itself to the power of having more and more people. It plays to the rich. It just does. In terms of who can afford the staffs that are going to go and do the recruiting and the evaluating, and then have another group of guys that are over here getting ready the football side of it. It's an amazing enterprise that some of these departments have.
So let's take Georgia and Alabama here for a moment, because the other two teams in the college football playoff and the other two SEC teams are going to be in the top 5 of the 24/7 Sports Composite team ranking when it's all said and done here for 2018. Are you trying to tell me that somehow the early signing period works to their advantage when they're having to go out and sign these kids while at the same time practicing for a bowl game that puts them in a national championship game? Right. This whole thing was designed to injure schools like Alabama and Georgia and Florida and Auburn and LSU. These programs that were doing all the major recruiting anyway. Early signing period was an attempt to level that playing field. And I'm sorry to guys like Rick Neuheisel that it's not working, but it's not going to work because the SEC schools are going to keep finding a way. Whatever you make the rules be, the SEC schools are going to find a way to use those rules to their advantage and keep bringing in players. That's just how it works.
Yeah, and I look at this from another direction too. And he mentions, these coaching changes at the end of the year, and then you hopping on this. He mentions making this in August and saying this should have been in August too. Think about if these kids had signed in August. Think about if you had signed with Florida in August, or Tennessee in August, or Arkansas in August, and all of a sudden the coach that you signed with, your name is already on the piece of paper, and they're getting fired mid-season. And all of a sudden you're like, man, I wish I had other places to look. I wish I had other directions to go. The early signing period, I understand what he's saying, but you could not make it in August. It had to be in this kind of December realm. And I'm with you. I think it detracts from these bowl teams that are being able to recruit right now. They can't do it the way some of these other teams are being able to do.
Look, I'll be very clear about this. There should be one national signing day. It should be in February. I don't think there should be an early signing period because the same reason you just pointed out, if you had it in August, these kids wouldn't get a chance to play for the coach they're thinking they're getting to play for. The same thing's going to be true in December. I think you have more assistant coaches leave after the early signing period in December this year. I think the longer you wait to sign your letter of intent, the more you put pressure on the school that you sign with to keep its promise to you here. So I like the idea of one signing day in February. I think that's the most fair to the SEC because you're going to have the SEC teams in the playoff. You're going to have the SEC teams, trying to get this stuff done during the early signing period. I think it should be in February, but even if it's not, the SEC teams are still going to find a way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how college football has always been.
Yeah.
You're always going to try to find your edge and try to do things differently than the other teams are. I mean, that's Jim Harbaugh's taking his team to Italy for spring, but it's just there's always the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
I mean, the lower tier teams can't afford to do things like that, and so I think that we're always going to be able to poke holes in the situation. I'm with you. I wish there was one signing day. I kind of like the idea of an earlier and getting it over with, but there's just no good way to do it. I mean, I took my official visit like January 10th of my senior year in high school, and I loved getting to get there and see the campus when there wasn't football games. So that was a big part.
Well, that's also one of the original intents of the early signing period was to change the official visit window because most people do take them in January right there before the February early signing day. It's obviously a tough situation if you're Ohio State, if you're Michigan, if you're a place where it's freezing cold. As one elite recruit said, I won't mention his name, that he wanted to go to Ohio State or Michigan because he didn't want to go play in a freezer. I mean, that's kind of the issue there. It's very cold in those campuses. You come to Alabama in January, it's not nearly as bad. It can be cold, but it's not likely to be quite as cold. Right. All of a sudden now, if you open up that official visit window in like the spring, that kind of levels the playing field for the Big Ten, which is what all this stuff's about. It's about sort of reducing the imbalance that favors the Deep South team.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously a lot of people know Rick Neuheisel's background. I mean, he was the head coach out at UCLA, and he's out there dealing with a lot of those things. To me, and I understand what he's saying, you couldn't get that staff size at places like UCLA, or maybe you can. Maybe Chip Kelly's doing that, but you have to find different ways to do things. You have to be a successful coach and being able to recruit these players. And to me, just not a possibility at all universities. You can't make all 130 universities the same way when it comes to
quick comment from Raymond Cox, kind of a rebuttal here. He says, why have a signing date period? If the recruit's ready, why can't he just sign on the dotted line once he decides? And I guess there is that there as well. But I like the idea. If I ever had a son, and listen, you may have a son that one day plays college football. My guess is I probably won't. But if I ever did, I'd tell him to wait as long as he possibly can, even past signing day, because you just increase the window in which the school that's trying to make promises to you keeps those promises.
Well, there's another angle to look at that too. Is some of these windows are closing at some of these universities. I mean, like we just talked about, that you have some of these decommits because maybe they're getting squeezed out. Maybe these schools are getting interest from other players. So I think that, listen, if your decision is going to come down to a mid-major team, if you're going to come down to Bowling Green or going to Georgia, then you're going to commit to Georgia right away. You're not going to say, oh well, maybe their window is going to close up. So I think you have to balance it. I think your kid has to be smart. I think they have to love the university and the football program, and you just take it from there.
By the way, some of y'all were making fun of Ed Orgeron, how he sounded in some of the audio that we played a little early in the show. You haven't heard anything yet. Coming up in just a moment, we have some hilarious Orgeron audio describing his time on the recruiting trail here the last couple of weeks. Before we get to that, though, let me do item number 8 here in our AT&T SEC Country Life First and 10 list. And I thought that Chris Johnson from SI had a really interesting piece kind of looking at how the new coaching hires are going to impact the early signing period and how that new early signing period impacts these coaching hires. And one of the things that Chris brings up is about Chip Kelly at UCLA, who almost got the Florida job, was in contention for that job. And Chris wonders how Kelly's going to do at UCLA. And he writes that UCLA made the splashiest hire of the coaching carousel, plucking former Oregon NFL coach Chip Kelly from his analyst gig at ESPN to replace Jim Mora. Kelly's college track record suggests he won't need long before his teams are putting up points and buckets on Pac-12 defenses. And his pace-pushing system should be attractive to the bounty of skill position players on the West Coast. That's Chris Johnson from SI talking about Chip Kelly. If you look at the 24/7 Sports Composite team rankings right now, UCLA is ranked somewhere around 30th in the country. A few spots ahead of that is Dan Mullen at Florida, who finds himself at 18th. And I think this is going to be a really interesting side-by-side comparison here leading up to December the 20th. Who's going to end up with the better overall class, both after the early signing period's over and then in February? Is it Mullen at Florida, which is obviously a talent-rich program with connections to a lot of high school talent, but UCLA shouldn't have to take that much of a backseat to that either. I believe that Mullen's probably going to out-recruit Chip Kelly, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think that Mullen was a better hire for Florida than Chip Kelly would have been. I've said this a million times. I think that Florida dodged a major bullet for whatever reason, not getting Kelly, either because Florida didn't want him or Kelly decided to move on. But Mullen is an upgrade over what Kelly would have been, and I think these next few weeks in recruiting are going to prove that.
Well, I think that if you're at a place like Florida and the University of Florida, it almost recruits itself in a lot of different ways, and you have that recruiting hotbed, and people are going to come to Florida to play defense, to play corner, to be a wide receiver. They need a quarterback. There's so much love at the University of Florida, and there's so much love for that program and what they've been recently in the last 10 years that I think it almost recruits itself in a lot of ways. I'm not sure UCLA has the tradition-rich football in a lot of different ways like Florida does, at least not recently. When you talk about Urban Meyer, when you talk about Steve Spurrier, UCLA doesn't have that. And I think that when you look out right now, the fact that Florida State is going through a coaching change is a big notch in Mullen's direction as well. I think that when Florida State's on top of the world recruiting, then all of a sudden Dan Mullen comes in, he tries to poach some of those guys. Willie Taggart and Dan Mullen both kind of climbing uphill right now. And so I think that kind of plays into Mullen's favor as well.
To be fair here, though, I understand what you mean when you say that Florida almost recruits itself. It's obviously got a lot of advantages when it comes to recruiting, but Florida didn't recruit itself when Jim McElwain was head coach. Outside the top 20 in 2015, outside the top 10 in both 2016 and for the 2017 cycle that just happened last February. I mean, McElwain missed out on talent. That's a big difference from Will Muschamp, who was perennially in the top 5, Urban Meyer, who had put together the #1 class overall. Florida may recruit itself for some coaches, but it didn't quite work out that way for Jim McElwain. So when Mullen comes in and has more success than McElwain did, and I believe that he will, let's make sure we give credit to Mullen on that because he's doing better than McElwain did. I believe that the main reason why McElwain got fired was not unsubstantiated death threat claims. It's just not bringing enough talent.
And that's possible. I think the way I look at it is this. You have kids that Dan Mullen will be recruiting in Florida that have grown up Florida Gators fans. They've seen Tim Tebow. They saw Urban Meyer. They saw national championships. They saw Chris Leak. They just need the push to go to Florida. You know what I mean? They just need to be pushed in that direction. They need to be shown a little bit of love from Dan Mullen to say, you know what? He's building something. I'll hop on. I love the University of Florida. I love the Gators. I'm going to do the Gator Chomp all night long. UCLA, I don't see it having that brand name. I don't think that there's a lot of kids that grow up and say, man, I can't wait to get to UCLA. I just think that Chip Kelly's fighting a little bit more of an uphill battle.
That may be true, but Jim Moore actually did pretty well with recruiting at UCLA. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he did it pretty well. But Chip Gromlins in the comment section says this. I didn't know this. He says UCLA does not even have a 100-yard practice field. Is that true?
Probably so. I mean, a lot of teams.
How is this even the same sport then?
Well, maybe it's. I would have to imagine they have a 100-yard practice field. Maybe not an indoor practice field, but they don't have. I mean, it's not like they have their own stadium.
They go all the way to Pasadena to play the.
Yeah, it's not like they have their own huge stadium.
Man, I'm telling you, it is so different out there.
They actually, I know that last year there was the first time ever they had their spring game on campus at UCLA. So maybe that's starting to trend in the right direction as well.
What were you laughing at, by the way? In the comments
I was laughing at Jamie Bailey that said, "Not sure if y'all are getting around to it today, but I just want to say that Jimbo is trash."
Jamie's a Georgia fan. Come from? Georgia doesn't play Texas A&M for 100 years. He just wanted to sort of drop in there.
I wish I could have stopped from laughing because I was like, I don't even know where that comes from, but that's funny.
All right, well, speaking of funny, I think you're going to think this is pretty funny. It's item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Life First and 10 list. And so we mentioned before, LSU did practice yesterday, so Orgeron spoke to the media after practice was over, and he was asked a serious question. This is a legit question that all SEC coaches are facing right now. How do you handle the challenges of getting ready for a bowl game while also getting ready for early signing period and recruiting, which begins on December the 20th? And Orgeron said, heck, it hasn't been hard at all. In fact, it's been kind of fun. And here's why Orgeron said it had been fun.
I like it myself, especially when I go to one home and there's some gumbo with potato salad. And I went to the next home and it was the best red beans and rice and fried chicken and cornbread I'd ate in a long time. So get some bigger pants, but besides that, it's going to be fun.
So you may not have heard what he said there. It's a little hard to understand. He says you need to get some bigger pants because of all the meals that he's eating at all these recruits' house. The gumbo, the red beans and rice, and fried chicken. I got to tell you, that sounds like a pretty good life right there. To go from one Louisiana household to another and really have the red carpet rolled out to you with a good home-cooked meal. I tell you, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I'm telling you right now, we hosted Mike Shula on a visit to my house, and the biggest task for my parents was we don't want, everybody's probably just cooking him steak or we going out to restaurants getting this. I think we cook ribs. I think ribs was the meal of choice. And he said that on the visit. He's like, man, it's that point in the year where I've got to wear sweatpants when I get home because it's like every meal is like this gourmet meal. And everybody's so excited to have it
out for the coach.
Yeah, you want to roll it out for the coach. He's coming in your home. You want to make sure you feed him well, and you just hope for comments like that Ed Orgeron's giving out. Now, the best stuff I've ever had.
Is your family known for good cooking? I mean, because I can imagine some of these families,
Yeah.
They're putting their best foot forward, but let's be honest, not everybody's got equal skills in the kitchen, if you know what I mean.
It is funny. You do see some of the recruits nowadays, and it'll pop up and say in-home visit, and then they go to a restaurant. Like, they're at a restaurant down the street. Hey, was happy to have them on the couch. We're going to go down the street and eat, and, we'll kind of figure it out from there. But there is a lot of people, and my dad is a good, good cook on the grill.
That's nice. I saw the new Florida State coach, Willie Taggart, doing an in-home visit of the day, and whatever's around the table, there's this big old bottle of hot sauce right there on the table. It's like, you got to think there's also some of that going on as well. It's like, there's a challenge presented to you, like the hottest food you can eat or the whatever, and you just got to get down there and kind of roll with it, whatever it is.
It is interesting too, because at some point, and it's just kind of like an insight into my recruiting. At some point, you do run out of topics at the kitchen table, and the coaches are sitting there trying to grasp for topics like, they'll start looking around the table. You got a sister there. What do you do? Or and it's so funny to have these coaches come in your home because they're so used to this.
But listen, it's the reason why a lot of coaches are not good at this.
Right.
I mean, the same handful of coaches get all the players every single year, no matter where they're working, because you got to figure out a way to not make that awkward.
Yes,
That's why.
exactly.
And at that point in time, the cool edits on social media don't help you, and being RBU or DBU or whatever you are, whatever your reputation as a school is, that doesn't help you. It's about, can you look somebody in the eye and engage with them one-on-one?
Yeah, and that's why I think it's such a big deal. We just talked about Jeremy Pruitt this way, that he's getting guys that are from Tennessee, that know UT. That's such a big deal because they've grown up in these places. You can have a guy go in and recruit a guy and say, I'm from this area. I know what you're going through. I went to this high school. Here's what happened in my high school career. How'd you do? And I think that's such a huge deal that people overlook when you can connect with these people at their own dining room table.
All right, item number 10. Before we get to that, let me remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless. DirecTV, they'll help you stay connected all season long. And for number 10, I promise you, we will not talk politics here at all. Alabama Senate race special election does go down yesterday, but MSNBC was on hand to capture one Alabama voter who, instead of voting for either of the two candidates, wrote in the name Nick Saban. This has probably been going on in the state of Alabama for a while, but still the national media having a little bit of maybe shock and awe over just how popular Saban is in Alabama. Here's MSNBC.
Joining me right now is Gary Dobbins, and you had an interesting experience this morning at the polls, a crisis of your own. Tell us about that.
Yes, ma'am. I'm a lifelong Republican, and this is the first time in my entire life that I haven't voted for the Republican candidate. I wrote in Nick Saban instead.
True Alabama football fan, that was your choice, huh?
Yes, ma'am. And the reason why is, at first I was going to vote for the other guy.
Well, we don't have to hear the reason why, so first of all, I sort of feel like the cable news folks here are having a little bit of fun at this guy's expense. Maybe Alabama folks in general, which kind of makes me mad here a little bit. I'm not from Alabama, but I'm going to stick up for the South here on this. But I'm also going to defend my man on this a little bit here too. I don't care what your politics are, Republican or Democrat. I feel like we need more people like Saban in the Senate. No nonsense, committed to excellence. I got to tell you, I think Saban would be a pretty good senator.
I think he'd be a great senator. I mean, you're talking about micromanaging and attention to detail and everything you could ever want in a politician. And, I'm with you. I think the national media, I think they come down to Alabama and they just look for whatever just looks like the most Alabama or Southern thing you can find, and they throw that up on the TV. That's kind of, to me, what they were doing.
Now, some of the people in the comment section giving the guy a hard time here, you got to realize something. For the folks at MSNBC, there's no distinguishing between, this is what a stereotypical guy from Alabama is like.
Right.
But that's way different than those classy folks over in Louisiana or those debonair.
That always cracks me up. Listen, I'm from Florida. I went to school in Alabama. I live in Georgia. I've been to Tennessee a ton, been to Louisiana. You don't differentiate. There's people like that in every town in the Southeast.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm smart enough to know this. I'm not from Alabama, but when MSNBC puts this guy on TV, they're making fun of us all here.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're making fun of every single one of us.
Yeah, they're trying to, at least. And I get tired of it, and it just I'll go on that tangent another day.
Yeah, no doubt about that whatsoever. But I think Saban make a pretty good senator.
I do too. It's like I said, it's attention to detail. And somebody in the comment section, I couldn't bring it back up, but somebody said he wouldn't make a good politician, doesn't lie enough. Rick King in the comment section wouldn't make a good politician, doesn't lie enough. There's probably a lot of truth to that. Nick Saban ain't going to beat around the bush. He's going to say, "This is how I feel. I'm not making no backroom deals. I'm just going to tell you straight to your face."
Oh, I'd love to see Saban giving some of those cable news journalists grief the way he does some of these sports writers that kind of go head-to-head with him in some of these press conferences, that'd be must-see TV.
I would love to see if like other politicians get intimidated by Nick Saban, because he's just an intimidating guy.
Sure.
You talk to him and you're like, okay, it's hard to look in the eye. I don't want to, whatever.
Without being very big. He's not physically big at all, but he certainly casts a big shadow. All right, coming up in just a moment, we're going to have a pretty funny Champion of Life today. Maybe one of the worst that we've done. You'll see why in a moment. It is hard to hear, but sort of funny to watch. We'll do that. Before that, though, as we told you, AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Now let's take a look at our AT&T look ahead. Hot night on the hardwood in the SEC.
Oh, man.
You've got...
clear your slate. Clear your slate tonight for these games.
You've got Savannah State against top 10 ranked Texas A&M. Actually, I think that Savannah State is like the fastest paced team in the country. Maybe they shoot the most threes.
Possible tournament team.
I don't know about that, but they're certainly a fast paced team. But you know it's a rough night in the SEC when you've got SEC teams playing both Sam Houston and Houston. Just regular Houston.
I agree with you. And if there was nothing else on TV on Wednesday night, I'd watch Houston and LSU. Maybe we'll do that, regardless of what else is on TV.
But none of Jama playing for Houston. Otherwise, I'm probably not watching.
Yeah, I don't know.
Pistol Pete
you have to immerse yourself in SEC basketball a little bit, and at times you have to watch other teams around the league.
Yeah, I'm immersed in something. If you're watching that, I'm not sure what it is though. All right, so time now for our Champion of Life. As we close the show each and every day the same way, we're always looking for champions of life, and today, well, it's found right here in the SEC, where Nick Fitzgerald on his Twitter feed. Now, by the way, I'm all about this. Mississippi State doing a great thing here. Apparently spending some time volunteering for the Salvation Army. But maybe the offensive line for Fitzgerald maybe got into the Christmas spirit a little too much. Take a look and you can decide for yourself. Well, I think what they're doing is they're singing Silent Night in kind of a falsetto voice, but I think they were also saying it sounds so bad they've sort of turned into howling dogs about it all.
Smart.
But the truth is, I'm not mad at them for that. It's bad singing, but at least they're in the Christmas spirit and they're volunteering for a great cause, the Salvation Army.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
No, I don't think you get on them at all about that. It is a great cause. And I wish more teams around college football would do things like this. What are they at a grocery store, at a Walmart or something?
Why don't you sing a few bars for me?
Yeah, I don't think it's not going to happen. It sounds like nails on a chalkboard, no doubt.
Yeah, I would sing myself, but we're actually out of time, so I won't be able to do that. I'll save you all for that.
SEC Country Live karaoke.
That's exactly. Maybe we'll do that one day. That'd be a lot of fun. Hey, check out their podcast, the audio version. There is absolutely no singing there. You'll like that. It's there for you at iTunes immediately after the show. You can enjoy that. Also, make sure you share this show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking about the SEC each and every afternoon here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Y'all have made it fun for us again. We love watching the comment section roll by as y'all argue about this, that, and the other each and every day. That's a blast for us. We hope you have as much fun as we do. We'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time once again for another episode of AT&T SEC Country Live.